Welcome to our episode featuring Mark Lassoff, a renowned figure in the technology education sector. Mark and his company, Framework Tech, have educated over 2.5 million individuals in digital skills. They were the pioneers behind the first streaming media network exclusively focused on career and workforce training in areas such as coding, design, and digital productivity. Mark's influence extends to his industry conferences like DevLearn, where he's been a frequent presenter and taught workshops on his approaches to digital learning. He's also earned the prestigious Learning Guild Guildmaster Award, multiple American Graphic Design Awards, and is included in the 40 Under 40 list for both Austin and Harvard. He is also the recent author of The Ultimate Guide to Creating Online Learning Video, a comprehensive handbook for instructional designers, which we'll definitely be talking about today. But welcome, Mark. It's a pleasure to have you on the
Thank
Video
you.
Learn podcast.
Let's be clear. That's Hartford, Connecticut, not Harvard College.
Yes.
I was in the half of the class that makes the upper half possible, so Harvard was not on my radar.
Exactly. Listen, you can't have the top without the bottom, so thank you for doing whatever you did to make that happen.
Absolutely.
But
Well, thanks for having me on.
absolutely, Mark. It's a pleasure to have you. And so, I think it's very timely. You're fresh from DevLearn, and I realize by saying these things, it's going to date this episode a little bit, but DevLearn was just this past week. Already you were telling me stories about that give me massive FOMO for me not attending this year. Can you tell us, what was it, for those of us who didn't attend, what was it like? What are the big things this year that stood out to you?
I think, first of all, it feels like we're finally back from COVID. The attendance was high. I don't know if it was record high, but everything felt full. When you were walking from a keynote to the expo, it felt like leaving a baseball game. Just everybody kind of going in the same direction in this giant crowd. The networking was great. And I always think that one of the best parts of DevLearn is the hallway conversations that you have. I got to see friends that I haven't seen in a few years, reconnect with others. And then there are people who were there who I didn't see at all, which just indicates how big the conference has become. I think it was really good. The expo had more new technologies and vendors than I think we ever have. There was a lot of discussion, of course, of artificial intelligence, AI, and its impact on learning and careers, but still talk about the traditional topics of, good instructional design, video, authoring tools. So it was a very balanced conference, and as always, I have a great time when I go.
That's fantastic to hear. I'm curious, whenever, AI has been brought up at HR conferences or digital learning conferences, I think you can definitely get a sense very quickly whether there's a sense of hope from the crowd of how this is going to change the work that they do, but also a sense of uncertainty about how it's going to ask them to change their work. I'm curious, what was the atmosphere like there at DevLearn?
I think the reactions were all of the above. We're talking about a very new, highly impactful technology that's going to change a lot of things about the way we work, about the way people learn. And the L&D industry is at the cross section of that. I think that there's a lot of optimism about what we can do to use this technology to educate and provide information and help people do their jobs and help people learn new skills and improve workforce development. I think there's a lot of trepidation and fear that instructional designers may become extinct. And I think, there's a bunch of us somewhere in the middle who, have some fear and some optimism. But, there were a great many products, integrating AI. And I think seeing how the products were integrating AI made people feel somewhat more comfortable with what's coming on the near horizon. But the technology is very young. And of course, the prognostications were everything from, no one in this room is going to have a job in 5 years to, this is the world's greatest virtual assistant that you don't have to pay. So, I think like any industry, we're going to be impacted. And I think people are hesitant, but hopeful.
And because at these conferences there's a wide range of aptitude, AI aptitude, we'll call it.
Mhm.
Did the keynotes or did any of the sessions have big takeaways that we should all be thinking about for those of us who weren't at the conference?
You're assuming I went to the keynotes. Um, I hang out with friends. I mean, the keynotes are at prime breakfast meeting time. But
True.
the sessions, there was an overall theme. First of all, there was a lot of AI sessions, and I think a lot of it was trying to grasp how we can use it now and use the tools that are available to make our work better, easier, and advantage our learners. I think if there was any central theme right now, that's what it is. How do we use this thing? Let's understand it. Let's take advantage of it, versus really kind of fear mongering about it, that it's going to take over the earth and, we're not going to have any food. So I think the conversation was pretty constructive for most people because they were introduced to tools and techniques using, just for example, ChatGPT that they haven't been introduced to before. So I think that was really positive. The sessions range. There was a lot of concurrent sessions that either talked directly about AI and AI tools or featured AI. My friend and colleague Josh Cavalier, who many people know, led a terrific session about just the basics of AI, where people kind of discuss what is it, what do they want to know, and there was a lot of questions. Again, it's interesting. I think next year, we'll be a little bit down the hype cycle on this, and maybe the discussions will be a little more realistic, and the tools will be a little more substantial. But we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of excitement around, this is the year of ChatGPT, and we've seen that being used in so many different ways. But you're right, as we continue to productize certain features or the ability to do prompts or approach different ways of working, I think we'll definitely see difference along the way.
Yeah, well, I think too, ChatGPT may or may not be replaced by something else in an instant. We're all not using MySpace anymore, and that was a
Most of us,
pretty
yes.
rapid revolution. Products get replaced by other products that are superior. There's rumors that Google is coming out with a more comprehensive AI tool. So time will tell what the discussions are next year. This wasn't on anyone's radar, a year ago at DevLearn 2022. And with the release of ChatGPT, I guess we're going back about what, 10, 11 months now. It changed the whole conversation. So I'm excited. I think next year at this time, the tools will be more substantial, improved, and we'll really have a better idea of what the long-term impacts are going to be.
I definitely hear you there, and we'll see what the topics are next year. I'm almost certain that AI will take on either the same face or maybe a slightly different version in those conversations. Since you brought up your colleague Josh, and also when I think of Josh and DevLearn and you, I also think of the video mastery certificate that you
Mhm.
run, which just an overview is a 2-day program at DevLearn where folks can learn video skills, and I think that's a great segue into what I want to spend the bulk of our time talking about is how to put together good video. After all, this is the video learning lab, and we're looking for folks who can shed light on best practices, especially for those who are getting new to video and new to creating. I'm curious, what is the profile of those folks who come to you to really either brush up on video or learn video skills for the first time?
It's interesting. So I taught this certificate program along with Josh Cavalier and Matt Pierce from TechSmith. And I think Josh and Matt had the idea a year ago and approached me at Demo Fest at DevLearn 2022, along with David Kelly, the executive director of the Learning Guild, and said, "Hey, you interested in doing this?" Of course I was. And the three of us have been speaking on video for years in different organizations, different conferences. And what we wanted to do was really take all of our best practices, all of our stump speeches, and put them together into a 2-day certificate program. The people that we drew were from all walks of L&D life, from single person departments having to produce video to people with sophisticated studio operations, creating video for enterprise level companies and everybody in between. We had some people who knew how to edit video, some people who didn't, some people who had created 1,000 videos on YouTube, and some people who had created zero. So it really was a diverse group. And what we tried to do was take them through the experience of marrying a learning experience design along with video production and kind of weave the two together into a 2-day workshop. The first time you deliver something, you always look back and say, well, that could have been better, that could have been better. But the feedback was good. We'd like to, if the guild would agree, do it again. We think it was worthwhile. And I think people really were able to, in the end, produce good videos. And that was kind of the central idea, was they'd apply all this to producing a short learning video about something silly, like, making a peanut butter sandwich or something like that. And, to a large degree, it worked. I think that video remains absolutely central to learning, and I don't think that's going to be impacted by AI. I think video now is the primary medium through which, learning which online learning takes place.
It is interesting you say that, because I think that I agree with you partially in that video will continue to be important. It's one of the most engaging mediums that we have to convey information. But I also think that, I can't help but put my Synthesia hat on for just a second and say, I do think that AI video does change, maybe not the principles of what goes into good instructional video, but more so how you produce it. Meaning, we're taking the physical process and turning that into a digital process. So I'm curious, what are the main tenets that you, Matt, and Josh deliver in the Digital Mastery Certificate? What are the core concepts or the stump speeches that every new creator should know?
So I think first is, applying good instructional design process to video, which means creating strong outcome-based learning objectives. What should they be able to do after watching this video that they couldn't do before? I think next is having a planning process that works for the size and scale of your operation. We produce here sometimes 10, 12, even 15 videos in a week. That's not the same planning process that someone who's producing one video a month needs, but you still need a process that works for you, that allows you to go into production feeling confident and ready. I think next is understanding the context of where you are distributing the videos and who your learners are, and understanding the cross-section of those two. For example, we are now putting videos on TikTok. That's not the same videos we're putting on YouTube. That's not the same videos we're developing for someone's LMS, even though the topics may be the same. Before we got onto the call this morning, I was producing content about low-code and no-code development platforms. And I produced different content for Twitter than I produced for YouTube, than I produced for syndicated distribution. And the reason for that is understanding the audience motivation on each of those platforms, even though people were going to learn something. So I think going into production with that understanding, and then from the production end, look at what good commercial producers are doing and do those things. Again, within the context, the context of YouTube is different than the context of an LMS, different than the context of broadcast or syndication. So, you've got to produce with that in mind, but within that, produce the best video you can. So look at things like on-screen graphics. Look at things like, how is the video edited and cut? The average, one of the things we like to say in the class is the number of cuts per minute is going up in commercial production. And that may be because of attention spans, it may be because of engagement, but look at those trends and follow those trends, because a lot of learning video is a single shot that doesn't change, that frankly, doesn't engage many viewers because it's the same perspective. There's reasons that commercial producers do things like on-screen graphics. ESPN and and news networks invest millions of dollars in on-screen graphics because it increases watch time. And then I guess on the other end is understanding your analytics and reacting to them. Once you've produced the video in the context of the audience and channel, also understand what your analytics are, what they mean, how they impact what you're going to do, and make changes for next time. Iterate between productions based on what you've learned from your analytics. I think that's the 3-minute summary of the 2-day workshop.
Interesting. So I think what I like that you've done there is it breaks down, I think it expands people's perspective on what goes into making a video. I think for a novice creator, for them it starts with picking up the camera and hitting record, but for an experienced creator or somebody who's gone through this certificate course, they know that a lot goes into the pre-production, so thinking about the pathway and the delivery of this video, and then tracking the success of the video and the progress. So it's really bookending that production experience with both some forethinking and after thinking.
Speaking of books, one of the things I actually mention in my book is the relationship between time spent in pre-production and time spent later in production and post-production. And I found that every minute you spend in pre-production saves you 3 in production and post-production. The better your pre-production process, the less time it takes to produce the video. And, a lot of people like to just point and shoot and start filming video. And that's just not how good video is produced. The planning process has to be extensive and appropriate for what you're doing.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's good. Thank you for that segue. And let's shift right into talking about your book. So you wrote The Ultimate Guide to Creating Online Learning Video, a comprehensive handbook for instructional designers. Even just in the title, I'm curious, what inspired you to write this book for specifically instructional designers? Why that scope for this book?
I wanted to write the book with the longest title that came out in 2023, and I think I succeeded. A lot of it that inspired me to write it was just my interactions with people in learning and development. And I'm going to use the expanded world of learning and development to include people who produce videos for marketplace sites like Udemy, or people who build their own courses and sell them. And my interaction with them, and how hard it was to encapsulate all the information you needed to get a good start. And my hope is that after someone reads The Ultimate Guide to Producing Learning Video, did I get it? I'm not even sure I got the title right.
Creating online learning video.
Creating online learning video. Yeah, I was close. What I want people to walk away with after reading my book is they can understand exactly what the process is and what they have to do to produce a good video. And the feedback I've gotten is I've been successful at that. That people understand the processes really well. It's not about, and people spend so much time on which camera should I buy, which microphone should I buy, and none of that matters. What matters is your process and planning and your idea. And the other thing I want to get across to everyone who's, interested in video, and I tried to get across in the book, is none of this is innate talent. This is all skill. And because it's skill, you can learn to do this as well as anyone. You just have to put in the time and the practice in learning to create good video. So anyone can learn to create and engage audiences in learning video, but you got to put in the work. And I think that's very hopeful to me, because that means that, I can be, or anybody in the audience can be, as good as the best person out there if they put in the time and effort.
Definitely. And something that to pick out from the title is you specifically talk about online learning video. We're not talking about marketing videos. We're not talking about product explainers. We're talking about online learning video. So before we dive into that, can you take a step back and kind of define for us what makes an online learning video compared to just any other video that you might create and consume in other places?
Well, I think it might include some of the categories you mentioned, because the way I define online learning video is where the main purpose is a learning objective versus entertainment. You might watch Mr. Beast or one of thousands of YouTube creators to be entertained, But the reason people watch videos from my company, SkillSprints, is to learn something. They have an objective, and the video's objective is to teach them something, or to improve a skill, or to change a behavior, whatever the video is. But there's a learning objective that's at the center of the video. There's no learning objective really at the center of. I can think of a million shows, but there's no learning objective at the center of Night Court or any other show you might watch.
Yeah. So you're defining that as has a learning objective in mind. So to further parse that apart, that the assumption there is that by the end of that video, you will be aware of new knowledge, or you will have applied new knowledge. Is that a fair definition for that?
Yeah, I mean, depending again on the purpose of the video, you will be aware of, you've applied new knowledge, you'll be able to demonstrate a new skill, a behavior will change, depending on the learning objective of the video. I mean, it's almost infinite what the learning objective could be. If you look at the topic, the audience, and the channel, there's a million different learning objectives, but you should have one that's easy to describe, if you're creating a learning video.
And can you kind of walk us through at a high level, what is your process for defining the scope of a learning objective for a single video? And maybe you have an example in the back of your mind?
Well, I think, the general rule should be one learning objective per video. And if you have more than one learning objective, you should make more than one video. We know from research now, a lot of it, on Guo's research, about that people watch less of, a smaller percent of longer videos than they do of short videos in general. So we want people to watch, obviously, the entire video so they can understand the point well. But I think, too, sometimes the learning objective may be to support someone active in completing a task. If you have performance support videos, that learning objective may be, we'll be able to, this is a sort of column of text in Excel after watching the video. Single, simple objective, but that would be appropriate for a performance support video that may be 2 minutes long to support someone using Excel. A longer objective for a longer video might be, we'll be able to describe how to sort and filter data in Excel. That can be a more expansive video that demonstrates several elements of sorting and filtering data in Excel. 2 different videos for 2 different purposes. The second one, probably not a performance support video because it's not specific enough. Probably would be longer because it's demonstrating several techniques. But the idea there is to become familiar with a category of concepts or a skill set versus demonstrate a single skill. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, I think I've always, and maybe this would be an interesting discussion, but I do see, my bias is, given my background, my bias is a bit more towards performance. So when I think of learning video, I almost hesitate to call them learning videos because unless I'm implying that at the end of that video there will be somewhat a call to action, or there will be a new behavior or a new skill for someone to demonstrate or try out, so therefore we could then observe it and really say whether learning has happened. And I think I'm curious, from your perspective, is there still a purpose for, I guess, awareness videos? For example, if we have a compliance video, even if you're learning about maybe office decorum and how to treat employees with respect, wouldn't you also then want the employee to act on that information or to demonstrate those behaviors or skills? It wouldn't be enough to just say, hey, when you're in a non-office setting, that doesn't mean that you can kind of let your professionalism down. Does that example make sense?
Yeah, I think, learning video should be paired with other activity that's related to help people demonstrate the specific skills or outcomes that's desired. We also, know from research that video alone is actually not a great way to learn, but video becomes powerful when it's paired with other tools. And that could be as simple as including an exercise along with the videos like we do, or including an interactive activity to help reinforce the points. But video, because it's passive, it's real easy to watch video and feel like you've learned something, and actually have not learned anything at all. I believe that's from Myers, but I could be wrong. I'm not an instructional designer, and I'm certainly not a researcher, but I do mention something similar in the book, and I've just forgotten the exact citation. But the idea is correct that you can watch an entire video and say, well, I learned that, and no, you didn't.
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about comes from the pairing of video with other learning activity to help reinforce the overall concept. But video can be really powerful as a demonstration tool, as part of a simulation tool, as part of that learning process. But I don't think video alone. I think video alone is basically entertainment, not necessarily learning.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to highlight, in that, it's just one of the digital tools that we have in our tool belt to drive participants in our experiences into
Yeah.
new types of behaviors and new
Well,
performance and new skills.
and sometimes, Kevin, you're just providing information, right?
Mhm.
It's not a course, it's not learning. It's just information that people need to know. And I think sometimes we might overcomplicate that, where maybe the best thing to do is an email, or a small reminder, a job aid, a sign, versus a course. I've seen a lot of occupational safety courses that should be a couple of signs in at the place of work, that are going to be much more impactful than a video demonstrating not mixing bleach and ammonia. So, I think we've got to be careful of overusing a learning methodology when what we're really trying to do is pass on information.
Exactly. So I think, you can't force somebody to take action. You can only provide them with information that might influence them to do that. So I definitely hear you there, where video is just the format that we're using to communicate. So then that brings up the question for me. I think when we're thinking about engaging users through video, there's definitely effective practices that we can use in creating video in that format. I'm curious, what do you think is the most effective way to engage viewers through video?
I don't think there is a single most effective way. I think that goes back to context. What's the context of the learner? What is the channel through which they will be learning? And then I think the answers reveal themselves. If you look on TikTok as a contemporary example, there is a rhythm, there is a environment in which TikTok exists, and that people have certain expectations of videos that if you don't meet them within 1.5 seconds, on to the next one. So that's different than a video that's on within an LMS in the context of a course. However, that having been said, there's a lot of production-oriented things people can do with information graphics, with people appearing in the video, and I'll say both real and virtual people, to create a connection with the material and with the learner that doesn't exist in non-classroom learning. So I think there's a lot of things people can do. We're very fond of having a host for our videos. The other thing, there's a bunch of not to do's too. And the other thing is, don't start listing learning objectives at the beginning of the video. We're going to learn A, B, and surprisingly C. Nobody cares. Get to the point.
Yeah.
Have people who are good at delivering information on camera. The subject matter expert probably isn't oftentimes your best choice for your on-camera or voiceover person. And that doesn't mean they're not on camera, but you can use the context of having a professional style host who's good on camera, drawing them out. Sometimes we use narrative in order to make the video more interesting. So we have some videos that we produce where the main character in the video is also a learner. So and they're taking an online course that's embodied in the video. It just gives someone watching the video someone to relate to.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot that can be done, but the way that I learn is I watch the things that are engaging people now in different forms. So, if I look at learning on TikTok, I look at Miss Excel as an example. She's
Hmm.
engaged a lot of people with what she does on TikTok. If I'm looking at YouTube, there's a number of different providers I would look at on the technical side and the non-technical side of YouTube who are really good at engaging their audiences. And sometimes people just need the information so bad that they ignore all of that and they'll learn from something that's horribly produced. It's non-optimal, and someone with better production who's more relatable will eventually supplant them. But I really look at what are some of the popular people doing on YouTube. I think a good example is MKBHD, Marquez Brownlee, who's a tech reviewer. Tech reviews are a form of information, and education. And I look at all the investment in different camera angles and the way they present products is really interesting. So I am a student of video and TV as well as someone who talks about it. And that means I always have a good excuse to watch video because I can say that I'm working.
Yeah, that definitely helps. I'm curious when you're watching these creators in these different formats, like you mentioned Ms. Excel, you mentioned
Mm.
Marquez Browley. I'm curious, what is the lens through which you watch them? Are you looking to emulate certain practices that they have? Are you looking at the way they use on-screen text for information? Can you give us an
Mhm.
example of maybe somebody who's in your who is going to be in your browser history that you watch and you said, "Hey, this is somebody who uses this technique well. This is something I can emulate in my own instructional videos."
There is a tech YouTuber whose name is also Kevin, who does
Hey.
loads of Microsoft and other instructional videos. And he's made the rounds on a lot of podcasts, um, who I watch and I pick up things from. He's also on YouTube, he's on TikTok, on YouTube Shorts, on all the channels. And what I'm looking for when I watch him or any other YouTuber or television show, Alston Brown is another one that I watch his shows. I think he is one of the best instructional designers out there. And I watch Martha Stewart,
Mm.
who has a particular way of producing learning video. And what I'm looking for is the different approaches to helping people learn new information and learn new skills. And
Hmm.
that includes all the things you mentioned. How is the host or instructor perceived and shot on screen? How is the material shot? How are the screencasts done? What are the supporting graphics that are used? How do they open and close? I think a lot of people believe they should start a YouTube video by asking for likes. And I think that's the worst way to start a YouTube video. And anyone who needs to ask for likes probably isn't getting them. And I
Yes.
haven't seen any, real successful educational YouTubers doing that. That's just,
Yes.
that's just an example. You have to watch critically.
Yeah.
How many different camera angles are they using? Where do the cameras appear to be placed? How are they lit? What's the audio like? When are they using music, if they're using it at all? All of those things, I think, help you put together a composite of then that you can then marry to your own material and your own personal style. And
Hmm.
I think the number one thing is for me is authenticity. I'm a game show host on and off camera. And so that comes through on, in my work.
Yes.
And if I do it a different way, I'm not being authentic to myself. And that's not just, that's everything from the on-screen graphics that we use to the way the scripted segments are worded to the way we communicate in other materials with our learners.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point in when you mentioned the other, I was almost going to say the other Kevin on YouTube, but there's many Kevins on YouTube. But and I'm blanking on his last name.
So am
Something
I,
that
which is why I called him the other Kevin.
oh my goodness, I feel terrible for this person.
Well,
But
luckily, we have these tools at our fingertips.
that's true, but then we'd have to start typing. So, but what I was going to say about this person, I'm going to try and I actually can't walk and chew gum at the same time, so I'll let you handle this. But this person, I think a lot of people, like you were saying earlier, a lot of people get hung up on the camera equipment that somebody is using, or they get hung up on this person's visual style or presentation. But this particular YouTuber, I think, is very straight.
Kevin Stratvert, you're talking about?
Yes, Kevin Stratford. Other Kevin is named Kevin Stratford, and we'll be sure to link those in the show notes. Thank you very much for that, Mark. But his style is very simple, and I think where he excels, and not to call out just a Microsoft tool, but where he excels is his presentation and the clarity and the steps with which he explains the skills that he is trying to teach. And I think that's something that we could all emulate, where whether you're Martha Stewart or Marques Brownlee or Kevin Stratford, I'm not going to forget that name now.
It's about Stratvert.
Stratford. Thank you.
There we go.
Much.
Yeah, I'm old. I have an excuse for forgetting things.
Which is why this is terrifying for me. But it's the clarity of his presentation and the simplicity of his presentation that really excels. And I think it all goes back to the fact that you could rent the best equipment in the world, but if your explanations aren't clear, or you're asking for lights up front, or you don't understand how to structure your message and communicate that clearly and have an objective when you are creating video, you're probably not going to engage your audience in the best way. And
100%. 100%. You're also not going to engage your audience by trying to be Kevin Stratford or Marques Brownlee or Mr. Beast or any other personality that you know from YouTube or somewhere else online. You have to be you, and that's good enough, because people want to learn from you. If they wanted a Mr. Beast, they'd go watch Mr. Beast.
It's true.
So you really have to, again, be authentic to who you are if you're going to be presenting on video. And that's not just about how you appear. I mean, there are channels where the producer never appears, but there's still a definite brand that they've established for themselves that's weaved in and out throughout their video. Woven.
Yes. And as you've said all that, I couldn't help but think of Mr. Beast teaches pivot tables in Excel, but maybe that's his next career. We'll see. I'm curious about, we're talking about watching other creators, and maybe with a critical eye seeing what is the technique, what are they doing. I think to get started, there has to be some level of emulating those folks. And so I'm curious, what's your advice to give someone who's just starting out with creating learning videos? And I know the first bit of advice, of course, is go read your book. It'll give you a nice survey of all the instructional design theory that goes into that you should be aware of when making learning video. But what advice do you give someone who's just starting out with creating learning video?
I would say just get started. Just start shooting, and you'll learn along the way. Use the equipment you have. Use your phone. Use your iPad, and start shooting video and see what happens. And then integrate into it things like my book, YouTube channels about creating video. But you've got to start doing it, because you're not going to discover what your particular brand is as a producer or as an online instructor until you start doing it. And realize the first 10, the first 25 videos you make are probably going to stink. And that's fine. But then also, go back, and if you look at someone, and I'm going to use Marques Brownlee as an example, go back and watch their first videos and realize they also, before he was Marques Brownlee, was like a squeaky-voiced 14-year-old trying to do tech reviews. And it's still there. It's still on YouTube. And you can go back and watch some producers grow up on video, and sometimes literally, as well as them growing their figurative skill set. So it really can be rewarding. Even, Kevin Stratford's first videos are not as good as his current videos. And I would imagine the videos he's producing now are not as good as the videos he'll produce 2 years from now.
Hmm.
So I really think that, if you don't start, it's always going to be tomorrow. So you've got to draw that line in the sand and just start shooting. Because once you do that, you'll learn an enormous amount and you'll build confidence and you'll, realize, okay, why did this stink? Oh, that part was pretty good. I need to do that again. And you'll start building your toolbox, your repertoire of how you present things. And it takes time. I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm still getting better at it. Unfortunately, I'm also getting balder. So, the like
Sorry.
ships passing in the night.
Yeah.
But, I'll be a bald old man making really, really good videos 10 years from now.
Yes. So I said yes. I have no idea, and I'm just going to steer on straight into the point that I wanted to actually talk about, which was I think one of the most difficult things for new video creators to get on board with, and it's something you absolutely have to push through, is seeing yourself on camera and seeing your performance on camera. And I
Yeah.
think this manifests itself in a couple ways. In one, if you are doing live production and you hit record on your camera, if you are watching yourself, the tendency to say, oh, I'll get the next take right, or I'll get the next take right. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I just thought of as you were talking about that growth and that experience is I think when you're starting out, it really pays to just hit record and do one long take and get pushed through everything, all the mistakes until you finally get a take that seems even 50% acceptable. To that point that you were making, it's about getting started. And
Yeah.
there will be that same lesson that you're learning over and over as you try to make video. You will have to watch yourself. And so you just have to push through that so that you can get the feedback on what worked versus what didn't.
Well,
I'm
and
curious. Yeah.
everyone's voice sounds different
Oh,
to
yes.
them than it does to others because you're also hearing it echo through your skull. You're also hearing your voice echo through your skull. There's a physical reason for that. So your voice is going to sound different to you than it does to other people, and what you're hearing is what your voice sounds like to other people. I think what we're talking about is like there's a almost guaranteed going to be some imposter syndrome along the way. If not, you're
Yes.
probably a complete narcissist. Um,
Yes.
because you're seeing yourself from a different perspective. You're watching yourself learn, and there's a lot of vulnerability being on camera when you're not good at something, and that's okay.
Mhm.
You've got to push through that. It's part of the learning process.
Very much so. And with that, we'll probably get a lot of responses of, "Hey, I finally made my first video," and I'm hoping there's a way that we can get those messages. But really, it involves hitting record and just getting started. And so, to wrap us up here, Mark, I think you're just coming off of DevLearn. You've seen all this all the new tech that's coming down the way. In your book, you write the future possibilities are vast and exciting. Areas like AI, VR, AR, and adaptive learning are rapidly developing fields that could transform how we create and deliver learning video content in the future. I'm curious, having just come off DevLearn and through your own future thinking, what emerging tech or trends related to e-learning video are you most excited or hopeful about, and how might they improve the learning experience?
Trends that I am excited about. So first off, I think is the growth of new platforms to distribute video and video content in new ways, things like interactive video. Next, I would say that I am excited about the volume of video being produced, which is definitely
Mm,
going up. There's more and more. And I think also the trend towards producing better quality video, that people have realized that pointing and shooting a camera at someone doing an in-person lecture is not good e-learning. It's not good online learning. And the
yes.
last thing I would say is the growth of informal education through video on platforms like YouTube and TikTok, where you're seeing a lot of people actually with the intent of learning something, being able to go on and learn things that were almost impossible to learn before because of the size of YouTube and all of these micro communities that have grown along really kind of strange and sometimes nerdy hobbies. I am a passionate Microsoft Flight Simulator fan. I've been playing it since my Commodore 64 35, 40 years ago, and now play the current version. And I have learned an awful lot from YouTubers passionate about this single simulation game, and the community that's developed around them. That I now can play at a level that I couldn't play before. There was nowhere to learn that before YouTube. There was nowhere to learn that. And I imagine there's a lot of other people with slightly embarrassing hobbies or learning needs that they're learning from YouTube. And I think that's really exciting that, learning is becoming mainstream. It's not just something that instructional designers do, but, a plumber who makes a video about how to install a toilet, might be impacting tens of thousands of people who are now empowered to do that themselves. And I think that's what I'm most excited about is the penetration of learning into these mainstream platforms where now you can learn to do practically anything from changing your oil to dressing better to, having an important talk with your kid, and you can learn how to do these things and the skills involved from thousands of people who have no idea what an instructional designer is on a platform like YouTube or TikTok or any of the others, Instagram, that are out there.
Very much so. It's along with as more people have access to cameras, we've got more access to information, and as we have as it gets easier to deliver, it's just more access for everyone. And so, Mark, you've said a lot of great things. Two things that I want to mention before we go. Where can folks find the ultimate guide to creating online learning video?
There's a obscure site called Amazon.com. If they just search the title or search my name, it'll come up. That is the single distribution point, but we've got both the Kindle and the soft cover versions available. If you happen to be going to a conference where I'm appearing and there's a bookstore, it'll be there as well.
Wonderful, and we'll link those in the show notes. And Mark, how can folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more, or they just want to ask you some great questions about video?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. So just search my name, Mark Lassoff, on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to reach me. If you have a non-LinkedIn kind of question, it's Mark at SkillSprints, SkillSprints.co.
All right. Well, and we'll be sure to link those in the show notes as well. But Mark, couldn't thank you enough for coming on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I had a good time.